So today's Tourette Syndrome Awareness Day, the 7th of June, 2021. And I'm Paul Stevenson. I'm Ambassador from Genius Within, Tourette Syndrome Ambassador. And this is my colleague, Ava. Hi, Ava.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you all for coming along and joining us today. I'm Ava Doski. I'm the Customer Experience Manager at Genius Within, but I'm also a clinical psychologist by background too.
Move on to the next slide, please.
So just a very brief session planned for today. We've done the introductions, Paul and I. We'd love to do the introduction with you guys as well, but there's over 70 of you here, so that will take pretty much the whole session. We'll go on to thinking a little bit about what is Tourette syndrome. We'll have a look at the positive assessment video with Paul and Nancy Doyle, who's our CEO. We'll do a question and answer. Well, I'll be doing that with Paul today. We'll watch another video, your words, your voices, and then do an open Q&A with all of you guys.
Thank you. Hey. So, what is Tourette syndrome? Well, Tourette syndrome is a neurological condition. People with Tourette syndrome have involuntary tics. Tics mean they make sounds and they do movements that they really cannot control. Also, you can have tics at any age. Thank you.
Thank you. So what are tics? Tics are muscle movements or noises which the person can't help doing. Tics can be fast. They can happen again and again and again. Tics can change. So you can have one type of tic and then you could present with another. And Paul will go into more of the different types of tics there are in the next slide. But also people with Tourette syndrome are not doing them on purpose. So that's a really important thing to remember is, you know, just what Paul was saying, that involuntary, so it's really difficult for them to control these. So they're not doing these on purpose.
Right, so we've got types of tics. We've got simple vocal tics and complex vocal tics. The word simple doesn't imply that they have any less impact on the individual. It's just a way of defining how the tics manifest themselves. So simple vocal tics can range from whistling. My tics might just make an example of it just to show you, but hey, throat clearing, sniffing, which is quite a confusing one because a lot of people ask, is a sniffing tic a motor tic or a vocal tic? Well, it's down there, hey, in the simple vocal tics. So we've got coughing, tongue clicking, grunting, and animal sounds. So there we go. My tics always do a bark. Nearly got us thrown out of an hotel once because the manager came over and said, you know, you're not allowed to keep animals in your hotel room overnight. And my wife said, it's my husband. Hey. So moving over onto complex vocal tics. So the tics can be as complex, and this fools people sometimes because they can go as far as uttering words or phrases which can be out of context and also inappropriate. And we've got coprolalia, which is one of the myths that we're going to bust today, which is what people call the swearing tic or obscene language or cursing. And even though the media like to portray this as one of the identifying things for Tourette syndrome, that they say to people, you can't have Tourette syndrome because you don't swear. Well, not everybody with Tourette syndrome has coprolalia. Percentages are maybe between 10 and 15%, maybe more, but we don't have very much up-to-date stats on that. But I'd also like to point out that while coprolalia is pretty rare in the condition, it's just as much a tic as whistling or throat clearing. There's no malice or intent behind the tics. And then we've got echolalia, which is repeating other people's words. I had an occasion in the school recently where the teacher said, yes, the pupil ticked and he swore. I asked him what he'd said, and he repeated it, and then he repeated it again. And this is part of echolalia, where you will repeat a tick over and over again. So we'll move into the motor tics, the simple motor tics. Like I said, they're not inferring that they have any less impact on the individual who has them, but we've got eye blinking, eye rolling, grimacing of the face, so where facial muscles pull the face to the side, shoulder shrugging, limb and head jerking, and abdominal tensing like little crunches. The complex ones can go to doing such things as sophisticated as jumping and twirling, reaching out and touching objects or touching people. Hey, and we've got copropraxia, which is where people make rude gestures, stick the V's up at people, hey, or the middle finger, hey. And we have another complex tick there at the end, echopraxia, which is repeating other people's gestures. So we see with the word ones, we've got somebody repeating other people's words. Echopraxia is copying someone's movements. Hey, thank you. That were rubbish, Paul. Thanks God. Oh, thank you. Now, one of the things about Tourette syndrome is it's not usually a standing alone condition. And this is what makes the condition individual to the person, I think. So there's other things which occur simultaneously. Myself, I've got ADHD, which is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, people with ASC, which is autism, and I've got this last one here, which is called sensory processing disorder, or sensory processing issues, as I call it. Now, what the little illustration you can see with the like little album covers, and I like to try and like simplify things so people can understand what is a complex condition. So I've not only lived with Tourette syndrome, I've got something else in the mix. So if you can imagine one of the up-to-date pop stars brings out a song or a tune, no sooner has a song been brought out than a DJ's remixed it into R&B, trance, whatever mix. And whilst it still is the same record and tune, it's got a different beat to it. So I've put here, like in these little albums to illustrate it, Tourette syndrome co-occurring conditions remix featuring ADHD in the house. And the bottom one there featuring OCD and sensory P. So intertwined with our personalities, you'll meet one person with Tourette syndrome and you've only met one person with Tourette syndrome. While we manifest tics, our conditions can differ greatly by all depending what else is in the mix. Hope that makes sense, folks. Hey, woo, hey, pop, pop, pop. Pop.
Thank you, Paul. That was really helpful. The other thing that we really wanted to do was go over some of the myths around Tourette syndrome and address them today. So we've got a number of myths here and some actual facts that we'll go over. So the first myth is everyone with Tourette syndrome shouts rude and inappropriate words. They have swearing tics. But like Paul said, only 10 to 15% of people with Tourette syndrome experience copropraxia. The thing that really is important to remember is, as Paul said, you know, it's not with malice that they're doing this or on purpose. They don't mean to cause any harm or offense. And trying to really suppress these tics can be quite tiring and very, very stressful and take so much energy for the person. And another thing that is, you know, that we want to really be mindful of is that when individuals have these tics, it can be a release of pressure for the person. So the second myth is that Tourette syndrome is due to bad parenting. Well, actually, the fact is that it's an inherited neurological condition. So it affects the nervous system and the brain. The third myth is that Tourette syndrome is extremely rare. As Paul said, it actually affects 1 to 2% of the population. So 1 to 2% of the population have Tourette syndrome. An interesting fact is that Tourette syndrome is actually more common than having green eyes. So that's quite an interesting fact. Another myth is people with Tourette syndrome can't lead normal lives, but the fact is that individuals with Tourette syndrome can lead very full and fulfilling lives. And another myth is that people with Tourette syndrome can control tics. As Paul has already mentioned, tics are involuntary, so the person can't control these.
Oh, and I'm back in the room. Hey, right, my story. Back in 1963, my mum gave birth to me. Hey, sorry. So yeah, living with Tourette syndrome. I've lived all my life with Tourette syndrome and hadn't realised that I had it. Lots of simple tics manifesting themselves that basically got disguised away with characteristics and given me little titles like Paul's a nervous lad, and he's got some twitches, and being asked questions why I did certain things like keep touching my nose. I just thought my nose is itchy. Another tic I had when I was a kid that I didn't realise was a tic, I used to throw my head back, but I had hair back then, so I could disguise it with like combing my hair back. Hey. So I didn't get a diagnosis. So I'd had all these conditions, ADHD, OCD, sensory processing all the way through my school years. And recently I published a little bit of an article in LinkedIn showing my school report. And this reflected pretty much how my tics and my co-occurring conditions affected me. But yet I was disciplined for it, and my attainment level, even though it was high, I was dismissed as a lazy, good-for-nothing child. So I had a bit of a chaotic adulthood, and it weren't until I was age 46 and I'd lived through some emotional trauma of a friend being murdered, and also one of my best friends taking his own life. And I've got to say, I mean, I've experienced emotional trauma before, but this really affected me deep down. And I can remember crying for days, trying to come to terms with it. And it wasn't until I was at my friend's funeral that these tics started to increase. And initially they were just like, and shoulder shrugs, so pretty simple tics. And I dismissed them as being, you know, that I were grieving and I were emotional. But on returning home, these tics increased dramatically to the point of where I didn't know what was happening with myself. Having tic attacks, falling on the floor, the tics being wildly out of control. Hey, woo, woo, woo. And to going from simple vocals like coughing, whistling, and I used to do some animal noises, to the full-blown coprolalia, just shouting and swearing out of context, and it was quite distressing. So that's a bit about my story in that sense. I got a diagnosis, and in this diagnosis, I really pinned everything on it. I just thought, this is the day. I'm going to find out what's happening. Hey, and when it turned up to the day, I found it pretty disappointing because it said, well, this is what's wrong with you. You've got Tourette syndrome. There's the door. Go and live a happy life. And I found afterwards I were in no better position. I knew, but my journey started then where I thought, right, I've got to do some investigating and find out what the nature of this condition is. And this is what I did. Through this journey, I got quite a bit of media attention, and I wanted to share and help raise awareness that, you know, this isn't just a young person's condition, and there are a lot of adults like myself living with Tourette syndrome. And on part of that journey, I made a documentary with John Davidson that's now entitled 3 Men with Tourette's Go on Holiday. That wasn't the original working title. And then I got involved in a project with the BBC and Nancy Doyle called Employable Me. And this was like when things started turning round, because I'd found out what was wrong with me. And I had this positive assessment with Genius Within, and I was able to find out basically what was right with me. you know, what skills, what qualities I had, what came along with Tourette syndrome, things that I could embrace and work with. So in this positive assessment, I discovered my strengths. So the video, I think I'm right here, if I'm not out of sync, the video that's going to follow is taken from Employable Me, and it's a positive assessment with Nancy. So just enjoy it and make yourself a brew. Hey, fuck the pot, bollocks. And she's gorgeous still. Hey.
Nancy Doyle specialises in finding the hidden talents in people on the extreme end of the neurological spectrum.
People with neurodiverse conditions like Tourette tend to have strengths, but a lot of weaknesses as well. And what they've been paying attention to is all those weaknesses. But what I'm going to hopefully do today with Paul is draw out what those strengths are and what those might look like in a career choice.
Paul.
Hiya.
Hi.
Nancy. Hi, nice to meet you.
Hey, fuck. It's a bit of a mess. Sorry. Hey.
Take a seat.
Thank you very much. Hey.
So
You were gorgeous.
thank you very much.
Sorry. Hey, you've got lovely legs. Hey.
Thank you very much. The plan is to go through these cognitive tests and then consider those in relation to work that you might do. The first one we're going to do is block design. This is the picture, and this is how you make the blocks look like the picture. Ready?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll be testing Paul on a range of skills, and these will include perceptual reasoning, which is how well he can analyse situations visually.
Pretty shit.
It was pretty good, actually. And make sense of patterns. But also verbal skills. In what way are a fly and a tree alike?
A fly and a tree.
Yeah.
Can I just have...
Do you want to just stop and have a little stretch, have a walk about? Yeah. I hope you can...
Hey. Right.
Okay, and I'll do the scoring, and then we'll come back and talk about it in a minute.
Since Paul's diagnosis, all doors to work have been closed for him.
Can I go home?
Nancy's results could hold the key to types of work he could actually excel at.
Okay, so perceptual reasoning, you've got an IQ of 123, which is in the top 6%. Those are really, really strong
good.
scores.
Hey.
You know, you've got a higher ability than most to think about shapes, space, where things fit together, and how they work.
I'm pretty creative in visualising things. When my Tourette started, I didn't leave the house for like 3 months, so Carol bought me a little compact camera. I just went out and I got some cracking shots. I can visualise images, so I wondered how that'd fit.
It's not a surprise that you're good at photography or art at all. You know, those are without doubt your outstanding abilities. And there are plenty of ways to make a living from that, actually. He's in the top 6% of the population for his ability to make sense of pictures and shapes, and that really tallies with his interest in photography. But it's a really competitive field, and he needs to go out and see whether or not there's a market out there for his skills. See you later, Paul. Take care. Bye.
Have a safe journey back. Hey, don't get pissed. Sorry. For somebody to actually come out and say things like that, it's pretty good for my self-esteem. Hey, give me more ammunition to succeed. I'm not going to let it go to my head. But it's a good confidence boost.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, sorry, go on, Eva.
No, not at all, Paul. So now Paul and I we're gonna just do a Q&A session. We've got some questions that I'm gonna ask Paul, and if any of you have any questions, please pop them in the chat box. We'll get to them at the end of the session. So Paul, you mentioned earlier a little bit about how your Tourette's first presented itself. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, as I mentioned before, that at age 46, boom, I couldn't ignore what was happening to me. But with the tics when I was younger, I used to blink, I used to raise my eyebrows, sniff, touch my nose, and throw my head back. And something else I had back then, which it's took me ages to suss out that was a tic, I had leg drop tics where I used to just collapse to the floor and I had quite intrusive surgery to try and correct that. And this is one thing that I want to point out as well, that, you know, we don't only struggle with the tics and the pain, but we can also suffer from secondary disability. And due to these leg tics, I now have arthritis in, you know, through damage, through falling to the floor, which is, you know, as equally as disabling as the tics. Hey, well, next question, please.
Thank you, Paul, for sharing that. Do you have any family members who also have Tourette syndrome?
Right, I mean, when I started the journey and started trying to like analyse Tourette's, what it was about, finding out that it's genetic and where it's come from, I asked lots of questions about my parents and my grandparents, and certain traits that maybe would have appeared back in the day. And it's obvious that there is certain traits like ASC and also OCD. But my oldest daughter, Rebecca, who's 34, she also has tics. They're pretty simple vocals and motor tics, but she's still got them. And last year, 2020, in March, my oldest son, Harvey, who's 14, tics just appeared out of the blue, pretty much similar to what they did with mine. And Harvey's tics are quite complex, and so are his vocals, his motor and vocals. So I got a phone call a few months ago off my granddaughter, who's 14-year-old, and she started with tics as well. So that's like 3 generations of awesomeness. Yeah, get in. Hey, boom. Walt Disney World.
Thank you, Paul, for sharing that. You mentioned a little bit about your coexisting conditions. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about them?
Yeah, and this is what sets us off as individuals, you know, and having to carry on life not only with the anxiety of being in public and ticking, and the things that brings in school, you know, kids getting bullied, people at work under pressure. I myself saw it as a weakness, and I tried to hide my tics. But my ADHD and my OCD are blended in, and I feel they're all that much entwined in my personality because I've grown up pretty much undiagnosed. But something that really affects me is my sensory processing, because it's where my brain doesn't filter out non-threatening things. So I hear everything at the same volume. So a different smell that's introduced and I don't know where it's from, my brain automatically thinks something's burning or it's on fire. And these really act as a massive tic trigger to me, and have started me off in tic attacks. So
thank you. What is the most challenging part of your Tourette's, Paul?
As I mentioned earlier, the most challenging thing is the secondary disability. Initially, the tics are a massive big mountain to climb and to come to terms with. But for me, I mean, I'm 58 next week, and I dislocate my shoulders. I keep having repetitive strains in my neck, and my knees pop out of joint as well, dislocate. And it's living with that, you know. I've set things in place where I wear knee supports, and I'm just careful what I do. But I've got to say that, you know, that is a constant thing and is one of the most difficult things for me.
Thank you. Can you share any positives to having Tourette's?
Yeah, grandmas love me. Hey, balls. Well, the positives is I absolutely love creativity, and I've discovered that as part of getting my positive assessment. And for having a lifetime of where doors have closed, and things haven't been easy since getting my diagnosis, lots of doors have opened. One thing that were cut out the employable me was part of the assessment were that I may be good at public speaking, and Nancy highlighted this to me, and it was something that I've always wanted to do, but I thought I'm never going to be able to do this because my tics affect my vocals, and who's going to want to listen to somebody who's shouting stuff out or whistling and barking? Hey, fuck the bollocks. But lo and behold, here I am now working for Genius and really enjoying. Well, I'll tell you something. It's a passion of mine to do it. I've been helping and trying to raise awareness since my diagnosis, but to be able to work and be employed in this sector where I'm helping other people and passing on life hacks is an absolute brilliant thing. So it's a massive positive to me and done great things for my self-esteem. Hey, head's getting bigger. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Hey. So yeah, that's good.
Thank you, Paul. If you could tell your newly diagnosed self anything, what would it be?
Don't panic. You're not alone. Try not to fight the condition, which is easier said than done. But I dare say quite a few months into getting it, I wanted to fight it. I tried to resist it. I didn't like being like this. I isolated myself away for months. And it wasn't until I started to think, well, there's no cure, there's no specific medication. What am I going to do with this? I'm going to have to live with this condition. How do I live with it? So what I did then was seek out other individuals, finding out that I weren't alone. There's other people in my town, there's people in the Scottish borders, hence that's how I met John Davidson. And life's just got better from there because I've been able to meet people, associate with people. And that's one of the main things to do is get association, a support group network around you, and then also that ever increasing circle of friends. Hey, and maybe Jehovah's Witnesses.
Thank you. So lastly, Paul, if there was one thing you wished everyone knew about Tourette's, what would it be?
Right. So I've got an habit of like crossing over my answers into the ones before, haven't I? But I mentioned that there is no cure for this condition. So what are we left with? Do we do what I did right at the beginning and hide away? Or do we get out there and let other people know? And I think the only way forward, this is a conclusion that I've come to, is that we're not asking for acceptance, but this is how we are. This is the condition we've got. We don't do anything on purpose. So, just accept us. And I think things will go great from there. Since gaining acceptance in different areas, I no longer have the stress and anxiety of meeting people who already know about my condition. So I think if I were to, I would say acceptance is the only way forward.
Brilliant.
Get in there.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Eva.
Great.
Right, this next section is what I really wanted to put in here, because as well as everybody knowing that they're not, they're not alone, and the idea was to ask all the Tourette's associations from across the UK and to actually contribute. And the section's called Your Words, Your Voices. And I'm not kidding you, the response that came in is absolutely overwhelming, where people just like volunteered for us, came for us with videos. In fact, there was that much of a response that we couldn't actually concise and fit it into the programme. But what we have been doing in the lead up to this event, we've been sharing your voices on social media. And as the rest of the month of Tourette's Awareness Month goes on, after today, we'll carry on sharing that. And also the videos will be available on YouTube to say. But I just want to say, if you can't see your name or anything like that, we've not been ignored or anything. It's still there, and we want your voice to be heard. So thank you very much for doing that and contributing, and please enjoy this video. It's amazing.
The one thing I'd like everyone to know about Tourette syndrome is the fact that each and every one of us are unique. We are all different, we all present our symptoms differently. The only thing that is common within the Tourette's community is the motor and vocal tics. The rest are co-occurring conditions which make us individual from everyone else.
Tourette's is nothing to be ashamed of, and nor should it be hidden. In fact, learning more about this neurological condition can help your loved one who is struggling with a tic disorder to feel at ease, to feel acknowledged, and to feel loved for who they truly are.
Tourette syndrome is not rare. Receiving the correct diagnosis and getting medical care is extremely rare. Some areas have no care at all. Children are currently getting bounced around the system from peds to CAMS to psychiatry to psychology, and they're no further forward. Without a diagnosis, there's no acceptance. We need more specialist centres throughout the UK to enable people with Tourette's to get the medical care that they deserve and they need.
I would like people to know, bollocks, that we are all still fuck off human. We might move differently, bitch, tits, beach balls, say different things, but we still feel the same as you. Fuck off, asshole. We still think the same as you. So be not nice.
Not all motor tics can be seen, and not all verbal tics can be heard. For people with Tourette syndrome, there's a lot of suppression going on to stop the tics from coming out, like to stop an explosive tic. It can be quite exhausting, both the actual manifestation of the tics and suppressing them. That by the end of the day you feel like you've done a full body workout and you just want to sit or lie down, and then the tics start happening again. So I might appear to be standing here calmly talking to you, but actually my abdominal muscles have been twitching and I've been suppressing a vocal tic. So I am still ticking.
I hope you enjoyed that. I did. I found it moving, the different degrees to people's Tourette syndrome and how it affects them and what they want you to know about the condition. Can I just mention the lady in the video, Emma McNally? She's doing a fantastic crusade at the moment to raise awareness that Tourette syndrome is underfunded. And as she said, without diagnosis, we can't get acceptance. And so there's lots and lots of young people and adults just being bounced about the system, not being able to get a full diagnosis of the condition. Now, getting a diagnosis isn't about a negative label. It's a positive thing, because then we can understand and study and learn about what we've got. And she also mentioned that Tourette syndrome isn't rare. Now, it isn't rare at all, but one thing is rare is that it's underfunded. And Emma has set up this petition. We couldn't fit it in the link there, but afterwards, if you don't mind, we're gonna send it all out to you via email, And I would really appreciate your support if you could do by signing it and sharing it. And that would be really appreciated and would do the community a heck of good. Hey, I nearly swore then. God. Thank you. So we're moving on to this section of any questions. Hey. So fire away. I think my colleague Steph is going to be asking me some questions. If that's right. 1, 2, 3. Steph, are you there?
Yes, I am here.
Boom.
And we do indeed have some lovely, really interesting questions. So the first one is, and this is actually really important, do the Tourette's community mind people responding or replying to their tics, or should they be ignored in conversation? Obviously, it's understandable that that might be different for each individual, but in your experience.
Yeah, my experience is that, you know, there's not really any thought gone into the tics. And like I have coprolalia and usually come out with something that's obscene or maybe funny. And I understand that people might laugh along with me, which is okay. But usually when someone responds to the tic, because there's not been any motive behind saying the tic, it has a tendency to increase my tics, and my tics will get worse. So, you know, if I shouted out, for instance, I don't like cats, and someone said, why do you not like cats? I'd be like, what? Hey, because like I said, sometimes it's the first time I've heard the tic come out. So, yeah, it's something, you know, I mean, and the thing is, don't be afraid to ask questions, because I love people asking me questions about my condition, because if people don't ask questions, hey, then they make assumptions. So I find it better. Hey, Frank.
Okay, and another.
You're on mute.
Sorry. How best to support students with Tourette's, in your opinion?
Well, there's a fantastic source of information in the UK. We've got Tourette Scotland, we've got Tourette's Action, and we've got TIC Yorkshire. And all these associations have packages, information packages, that parents or students can take into school and show to teachers. And they also have a presentation and slideshow. So, and they're really good for getting, you know, going across. And across the UK also, there's lots and lots of parents who go into schools and really fight for a fair education for our kids. So I would recommend, you know, approaching. There will be links, we'll pass links on to you to which associations to go for. Thank you.
Someone says that, as you mentioned, your tics increased at a certain point in your life. Is it possible for tics to decrease for some people as they get older or at different points in their life?
I've just got to make this clear that I'm not medically trained, and I can only talk from my own lived experience and from people I've met. And there's people who whose tics have decreased. There's only one thing that's predictable about Tourette syndrome, and that's how unpredictable it can be. It's exacerbated by stress. So, you know, it will rear its head when things get very stressful. But I would say we just never rule anything out with Tourette syndrome. But I know lots and lots of people whose tics have eased. The other co-occurring conditions still exist, but it is a lifelong condition. That's the wrong information, Paul. Cancel. Sorry, that were a tick.
Someone else has asked, can you have tics but not meet the thresholds for a diagnosis?
The criteria, I think, at the moment is tics, motor and vocal, hey, present over a year and under the age of 18. And that's the criteria that is set for diagnosis. Of course, I didn't fit into any of them categories because it just came on bang all of a sudden. I had no medical history, but I got a diagnosis initially of Touretteism, but this was soon overturned and classed as Tourette's because obviously I manifested so many different tics. And but yeah, that's usually the thing. If you go seeing SIPs or CAMs, they're looking for these sort of things where, do they have a vocal tic? Did they have a motor tic that occur at the same time? Do these tics wax and wane? So yeah, I hope that answers that question.
another question that we have is, how would it be best to educate children in a secondary school when a teacher has been newly diagnosed with Tourette's? Should we be communicating this to the parents, and can a parent refuse to allow their child to be taught by a teacher with Tourette?
Well, I spoke about acceptance, and I feel really strongly about this, that, you know, when my condition started, youngest Charlie was maybe 6-7 months old, and the oldest was maybe, you know, 4 children, oldest one maybe 5-6 year old, and they've grown up in and around Tourette's, knowing that there's no meaning, no malice, no intent. Their vocabulary hasn't increased as far as stockpiling swear words that they can use at school, because they know there's nothing behind the tick. They're involuntary, they're not said with any malice. So I would say a lot of educating needs to be done, and to the parents and to the children, because this is the thing, if we don't ask questions, we make assumptions, and many assumptions have been made about me. People who haven't known have seen me in the street, thought I were drunk, thought I were aggressive, on drugs, and these are all the assumptions people make. But if someone had took time to talk to me, and I said, listen, I've got 4 kids here, you know, they're all asking for sweets and I'm struggling to keep control of things, they would have seen that I'm quite with it and that I'm no different. And as Luke mentioned, and John mentioned, we're just the same as anybody else. So it's about education and information, understanding and acceptance. You're on mute, Steph. Hey.
Another one is, many practitioners suggest that CBT is helpful to manage tics. However, you have suggested that tics shouldn't be suppressed. Do you have any thoughts on CBT?
I've not suggested that they shouldn't be suppressed. I've expressed that suppression is difficult and hard work. Suppression is a tool that can be given to an individual who's living with Tourette syndrome, and like any tools, I can utilise and use when I see fit. Now, I use suppression when I'm going into banks and when I'm going into petrol stations or anywhere public, hey, because I shout armed robbery. Or when I've been in an airport, I've shouted I've got a bomb, an Allah Akbar, loads of different things which could startle and alarm people. Obviously, it wasn't armed robbery, but the anxiety and the stress from a reaction that those tics would cause makes it easier for me to use suppression, even though I find suppression hard work. But different therapies, when given when someone's young, early intervention, have proved to be really successful. But nobody should be made to suppress, and that's the key thing. You know, I'm telling you, you should follow this structure, and you should be quiet. And I don't agree at all with trying to silence people. But if I can pass on some strategies, whether it's CBT or whether it's techniques, like for instance, when I'm hey, they were just an example. When I'm in somewhere where I don't want to shout out a vocal, I clear my throat, and it seems to satisfy the tic for a short while and works pretty well for me. So yeah, I hope I've explained myself a bit better there.
Okay. Someone else has asked about your OCD, and they say that is one of the most difficult elements for their son, that once he gets an idea in his head, he can't think about anything else. Would you say that that's true?
I'm very obsessive, like the big O. I've not got any OCD traits that make me ultra having things in place or super tidy, as also gets stigmatized on the media. But I do become obsessed with something, and with the ADHD involved in that, I've got an immediate drive to want to get a problem solved, get it solved now. And the greatest difficulty I have is just stopping and shutting off what's happening upstairs in my head. So yeah.
And we've had a couple of questions kind of related to stress and is there a way that in certain situations or experiences you can do anything to try and reduce the occurrence or the severity?
I mean, stress is an unpredictable thing, and it all depends what our perception is of stress. While I can think going into a busy marketplace, well, for instance, going into a supermarket, I find very, very stressful. I've got things that I do, pastimes, places where I can escape. I use mindfulness. I mean, mindfulness won't cure Tourette syndrome, but after being in a stressful situation, it helps me to calm down. And it's something I've developed myself through trying to regulate my breathing. I also, like, I've got pastimes like photography. It was mentioned in the documentary that I would try and get a career taking photographs, but I found that using photography, being creative, helped me find a quiet place. So in normal situations, when I'm integrating with people, the tics are banging and bashing, trying to get in, and then trying to get out. But when I'm being creative, I've got this sort of peace where, the tics aren't even knocking at the door. So, I think as individuals, and all depending how our co-occurring conditions fit ourselves, it's good to explore different sorts of things. But I would say downright being creative is a brilliant thing to do. So, hey, you've not answered that one, Paul.
As a grandparent, is there anything that you can do to help your grandchildren?
Yes, loads and loads and loads of things. Plenty of love. Just carry on doing what you're doing now. Because I didn't want, I mean, my grandparents passed away a long while ago, but I mean, my mum and dad just accept that this is a condition. I think the thing is sometimes, all depending what generation you're from, and you don't understand something, initially you might, out of love and concern, you might react the wrong way. But I just think that my mum said to me, "I've lost my son," and she was really upset. And I went, "You've not lost me, I'm still here. I'm still the same person that I were before. Give me a hug." You know what I mean? Make a brew, bitch. Oh, sorry about that tick. Hey, yeah, give me a hug and just treat me as normal. I mean, me and Steph, while we've been doing this campaign, Steph said, what 3 things should you do when you meet someone with Tourette's? And I went, smile. 2, say hello. 3, just carry on about as you normally do around me. So that's the thing. Just keep doing what you're doing and loving them, giving them hugs.
And there's a couple here now. So one is, do you think that acceptance is increasing? Do you think things are getting better?
I think so, yeah. I mean, there's lots of the members of the Tourette societies have got out there and they've let the voices be heard. And like what not to say to somebody with Tourette's. That was a great campaign that went out there. Lots of people on an individual basis, lots of school children. And I've got to say, my admiration goes out to the kids. It's difficult as an adult for me to get out there sometimes and talk to people. Self-conscious, your self-esteem, and like, I'm an adult, I can take things on the chin. But when they're young, and this is what I want teachers to know, that they're like proper soldiers. They know what's going to happen day after day. They know certain tics are going to be there. They know people are going to react in a certain way, but yet where are they still? They're there at school, trying to learn, doing the best. So I think we need to keep doing that, getting out there and getting that awareness, but also that acceptance, because it's not going anywhere, until we've got a cure. Just accept us for who we are.
Okay, got a couple more now. One is, if you suppress a tic, does it mean that later on you're going to have a bigger tic attack? Or is it just that the suppression will make you tired?
It might not manifest itself into a tic attack, because not everybody, experiences tic attacks. My own personal experience, somebody gave me an illustration. I think it was John Davidson spoke to me about it, and it was shaking a bottle of pop-up. If you just take the top off right away, boom, it goes everywhere. So if you try and hold it in, and yet it's still getting agitated, it will explode. So the best way to let off that pressure is to slowly release. But what parents do find is that after being, so many hours in a classroom with nowhere for them to escape, nowhere for them to a safe zone to let off the tics, children come home and boom, all hell's let loose with as far as tics are concerned. But these are things that we can do something about, reasonable adjustment in the classroom or the workplace. We can talk to our employers or our teachers about providing us a safe space, and maybe a class, a whole pass to get out, so that we can go and let off steam. So they're just a few ideas that people that have used successfully.
Okay, got a few now, so we're going to do some short, quick fire questions. This one's very important. Is it acceptable to laugh when the tics are funny, or should they always be ignored?
No, I laugh. You know what I mean? I laugh at my tics. Sometimes it's the first time I've heard them. And to be truthful, I've got pretty bad dystonic tics sometimes, where my hands and arms contract right up into my face and I can't walk. Now, I could ask you all, would you think that'd be an appropriate tic to laugh at? And I think you'd probably all just agree, well, no, it won't be. But if I shout out "Sweet Baby Jesus" as I'm, at Christmas time, or one of my famous ones I do is "Santa's Not Real" when I'm stood next to a mum with young kids at Christmas time, you can see the irony and the humour in that. But the key factor is what you're laughing at. Are you laughing at the individual, or are you laughing along with anything that's come out from the tic, the humour or anything? If somebody's ticking and they're hitting themselves on the head, it's rather distressing. So yeah, I think the rule of thumb is, to see what the individual's doing. That'd be a good thing.
Okay, I've got a couple that are sort of similar. One is, how do you handle bystanders' negative comments?
Right. I personally have found myself, I've not always been in a position to, I'm not said to challenge, but to explain what is happening. And when I say explain, I don't mean to apologise for having Tourette syndrome. If I've shouted "bomb" right next to somebody and frighten them, frighten the wits out of them, and I'm in a position just to say, I'm really sorry, I've got Tourette syndrome, I didn't mean to make you jump. Sometimes, quite a lot of time, it's just about shaking the dust off your feet and walking away from a situation. Because if you're in a stress state and someone's questioning or antagonising you, it has a tendency to make it safe. So I was shopping in one of the supermarkets and I bumped into a guy and he went, "What are you playing at?" And because I was stressed and anxious, I started repeating "F off, F off, F off." And he went to me, "Do you want to fight?" And I dropped my shopping and just walked out the building. I was able to compose myself. It was 10 minutes till he came out. And when he came out, I just said, "Can I just have a quiet word with you, mate?" There was no intention there to antagonise you or to challenge you. It's just that I had Tourette syndrome, and the response was brilliant. So it's taking some time, having, wanting understanding from people, but also taking time to educate them, because obviously he didn't know anything about my condition.
Okay. If you notice your child seems to be ticking, would it be helpful to raise it and ask if they want support and seek diagnosis, or do you think it's better for them to wait to tell you themselves?
To be truthful, it all depends on what age of your child is. I've got to tell you something. I've been guilty of just assuming stuff, which was wrong of me, that my son would want a diagnosis. While I think, and I truly believe, that a diagnosis is the way forward, because we get an understanding of what our condition is, and also opens up the avenue to support. We've also, if the young person doesn't want a diagnosis, I've had to respect that with my son. It might come to a stage where, the tics haven't increased any because he hasn't got his diagnosis, but they also haven't decreased. So it might get to a stage where he's in a position where he feels he wants to get a diagnosis. So, there's a massive difference, all depending on the age of the child. If you're struggling with a younger child who's distressed or injured by tics, then support is needed. So I would say, maybe go and approach your doctor for a diagnosis. Okay. But I'm not medically qualified to advise you to do that, sorry. So, because I'm French.
Your favourite. Also, we had a couple just quickly because we're running out of time. Do you have any tips on improving self-esteem in a newly diagnosed teenager? And this is sort of linked into it. How do you get help with co-concurring diagnoses post your diagnosis for Tourette's?
Right. Right, the first one is really difficult. You know, there's a lot of peer pressure about, and like I say, I've got lots of admiration for the younger ones who are living with this condition, because it is stifling and your self-esteem goes down. I pretty much, as an adult, I'm in a position where I could embrace Tourette syndrome and look for the positives that being neurodiverse gave me. And were these like badges of honor, where, you know, and also I think for the individual, for somebody to acknowledge how strong of an individual you are, to be living with this and yet being in a social environment, because a lot of times we've got that fight or flight feeling with our adrenaline releasing because of the anxiety, and you know, the biggest step sometimes is getting out the front door. And I think, you know, lots of praise, lots of love and reassurance of how strong our loved ones are who have Tourette syndrome. The co-occurring conditions, this is a real tricky one, because I was initially diagnosed with ADHD, OCD and sensory processing. I've since, I've had my 007 license revoked, which is my ADHD diagnosis. Heaven knows why. They said it got lost in the post somewhere. And I've had a heck of a job getting a diagnosis back for ADHD. So this is where we're coming to Emma McNally's petition, is that the system for people with Tourette syndrome and investigation is grossly underfunded, and we need to support that, and we need to get the correct, maybe we're just asking for equal balance with other conditions, other disabilities, which we haven't got. You know, with some cases we'll have 1% of the funding for other conditions. So once that funding's in place, it will make the process easier, I'm sure.
Okay, and the last one is, from your experience, obviously you know worldwide a lot of people with Tourette, who you do. Do you know that if your synesthesia, you know, when people get their senses and feelings mixed up, so you can feel an image, you can smell a colour, you can taste a word, you find that's quite common in your lived experience?
I mean, my senses are all over it, sure. You know, like I said, I can a new smell's introduced to me and I'm thinking, you know, the house is on fire, and run around like a headless chicken. But I do get, I find my senses are heightened, and I'm aware of more things. When I was younger, I used to call them my spidey senses, because it's like I can smell when people are uncomfortable around me. There's an atmosphere, and you know, so I don't know. It's not something I've investigated, but I am aware that my senses personally are pretty much heightened, because they're not filtered like a neurotypical brain. Medical information. So I think, have we come to the end there? I think we're running out of time. I would honestly, first of all, like to thank my colleagues, Ava and Laura, who's in the background there, who's been facilitating, and also Steph for looking after the question box. I found that I weren't able to monitor the question box and respond at the same time. It was just a task too much for me. But I would like to say that I'm really overwhelmed by everybody who's attended and the numbers that attended. I hope we've been informative, and I hope that, you know, you go away leaving you with more information than you had before. And like, you know, I just want to say a massive thank you to you all. Really appreciate it.